Okay, so the next step after your background has dried is going to be to paint the next most back portion of the painting, which in this case is going to be the plate. The plate can't just stay white. It will appear white in the painting, but we need to make it be a little bit of gray. And so up here on my palette, I don't even know what colors these are anymore. Looks like it might be some brown, some purple, maybe a tiny bit of black. But it's mostly water. So you can see that this is mostly water. I can grab more water to make the color lighter, even out here on my mixing tray. And then what I'm going to do is come out here to my painting. And like I said, the next thing up is to paint the plate. I'm going to start with a couple of these spots where it will be a darker kind of color. So you can see I'm going to leave some of these darker patches, and then I'm going to teach you a new technique for kind of working with paint, kind of blending paint together and moving the paint that's on your painting already. So here we go. We're gonna sort of start to move this around a little bit. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm cleaning my paintbrush off and I'm squeezing it dry. Okay, so I have a clean, dry paintbrush. And what I'm gonna do now is just take this paint, and you'll see that I'm moving it. I'm kind of softening it out and into the edges. So that I'm not making the plate darker and darker, but that I'm using the little bit of color that I had put on here to now kind of move around and fill that plate in. Okay. This is a subtle technique. It's a technique that it doesn't look like I'm doing much of anything, but it is the key to learning how to kind of control your watercolor a little bit more. The next thing I'm going to do then is go ahead and mostly I have water, and I'm going to paint kind of the whole rest of this, so that the entire plate is like this super light gray, even right over the top of where the shadows will be for the peaches. And then that's what I'm going to add next. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to grab something just a little bit darker. And while this is still wet, I'm going to bump some of this shadow color in here. And just sort of let it drift actually in the little bit of water that's still on my paper. Because what that does is make those shadows sort of softer and not so hard edged. They will kind of seep a little bit. So you can see that that's happening already over here, that they're kind of drifting. And I want that to happen. I want my shadows to kind of drift. Shadows don't very often have a super hard edge. Come back here and put a little bit darker color over here. And now, as is so often the case in a watercolor painting, I once again just have to let this dry before we can move on to the peaches. You can see I kind of deepened the shadow over here a little. And again, I cleaned my paintbrush off. I squeezed it dry, and I'm kind of softening those edges. I'm going to have to come back and paint on the plate at least one more time. But at least it's the beginning. of the plate. I'm going to go ahead and darken this bottom ring a little bit. I don't know if I can. Helps if I have a darker color. So right out here, this bottom edge is going to be a little darker because it's like the shadow edge of the plate. And now I've got it way too dark, so I'm going to clean my paintbrush off. I'm going to squeeze it dry, and I'm going to do like I did before. And basically what I'm doing, instead of adding new paint on, I'm taking just a little of the paint that I added off and moving some of the rest of it around so that it isn't such a hard dark shadow, but instead sort of softens into the edge of the plate. Like any painting, it always looks a little bad before you're done. So don't worry about it. Like I said, this is the phase now where this needs to dry again. But the next section is the plate, or the beginning of the plate. This isn't even really the end of the plate. We will continue to sort of play with the plate as we work our way towards making the peaches.